we are wrapping up our brain teaser series that we've been going through for the last several weeks. And what we've been doing is just kind of looking at the parables of Jesus and exploring kind of what his teaching is within each one. And just a quick reminder, Jesus taught in these parables for a couple of reasons. Is he wanted to make sure those who were there that wanted to engage, to actually listen to his teachings and implement his teachings into his life, that they would be there and they would take the things he was saying and study them and think about them and find the truth in them. But he also wanted those that were just there for the crowd to kind of be like, there's nothing more here for this show and I'm leaving. And he was also trying to hide some things from the Pharisees to give himself a little bit more time to teach. So he had several reasons for these teaching in parables, teaching in like these riddles to the people. And so what you have to do as we're going through these is you actually have to listen and think about these things. It just can't be something you just hear and just kind of pass on one side and go out the other, or you will miss it. And so we've been going through these parables. They're very much like modern day brain teasers. So I've been starting this off every week with some brain teasers, just get your brains going before we jump into the parables. So today I have 3 brain teasers. We're going to put them on the screen. We're going to see how you do. Each week you've slowly been improving, but you got to think a little bit outside the box here as we go through these and see if you can get them. So brain teaser number 1 today is this. It says it up on the screen. It says, how can you throw a ball as hard as you can only to have it come back to you even if it doesn't bounce off anything? Okay? So how can you throw a ball as hard as you can, only have it come back to you even if it doesn't bounce off anything? You have 10 seconds. You can't say it out loud. Got to keep these to yourself till we get to the end. Hold on. Don't throw the answers out there. All right, how many of you think you have an answer that works? Only a few on number 1. What do you think? Throw it up. Good job. My own family, my own blood. If you just throw it up as hard as you want, it'll come right back to you. It doesn't bounce off anything. There we go. So you got to think outside the box. All right, number 2 is this. Imagine you are in a boat in the middle of the sea. Suddenly, you are surrounded by hungry sharks waiting to eat you. How can you put an end to this? All right? So imagine you're on a boat in the middle of the sea. Suddenly, you are surrounded by hungry sharks waiting to eat you. How can you put an end to this? 10 seconds. Hold on. I'll get there. No questions. All right. How many of you think you have the answer? Okay, my first, you don't say it out loud what you think you have. All right, Steve Gardner, what do you think? Quit imagining it. That's the answer. All right. How many of you got that one? A few of you. Okay, here we go. This is the last one you get in this series. So we've done a lot of them. This is the final one. What gets wetter, the more it dries? What gets wetter, the more it dries? Hold on. Keep it to yourself. 10 seconds. What gets wetter, the more it dries? All right. Don't answer yet. How many of you think you have it? Oh, I thought there would be more. Chuck, you told me there would be more. Chuck lied to me. Gary, I've seen you multiple times, so I'll give you a shot. Gary. A towel. That is right. The more it dries, the wetter it gets. So Chuck told me all of you would get that one, and I gave an easy one at the end because I wanted you to feel good at the end of the series and be like, oh, I've learned a lot. Unfortunately, this is terrible. All right, so anyways, here we go. We're going to be looking at the parable today from Luke chapter 14. It's commonly known as the invited guest. And like every week, I'm just going to read the whole thing through at the start. Then we're going to break it down and look at what the teaching is, what the spiritual truths are that Jesus wants us to get out of this story. So here's what it says. Luke chapter 14, it says, when Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seat of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit at the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you also has been invited? The host will come and say, give this person your seat. Then you will be embarrassed and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you will be honored in front of all the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then he turned to the host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, or rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. Okay? So that is today's parable. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to walk through this. And in this parable, there are 4 key spiritual truths we're going to find. But there's also some just life wisdom, some life advice that Jesus has given us, that there's the spiritual side, but then there's the practical side as well for just your daily living and advancing in life. So here's how it starts. It says, when Jesus knows that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seat of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. So what's happening at this time, how many of you have seen that picture of the Last Supper where Jesus is there with all the disciples? Have you seen that? Like everyone has seen those paintings? Okay. So what would happen is, we know from context here, Jesus is going to a leading Pharisee's house. So what you have there is you have the elites of society probably at this dinner showing up to have dinner with this Pharisee. He would have lived in a very wealthy home, a nice home that would have had like an outer court and all, probably walled off, and then the inside of the house. So what happens is Jesus shows up at this, they're outside in the courtyard first, and then what happens is the master or whoever, the Pharisee, the guy whose house they're at, would open the inner doors, and those that weren't actually invited to the dinner would then go in to sit at the table. Now, when they would go in to sit at the table, the Pharisee, the guy who owns the house, would sit at the middle of the table, like you see in that picture, Jesus sits at the middle of the table. Then everybody would come in and grab seats around the table. So what you have here, all these elites and stuff are at this prestigious guy's house. They open the doors, and everybody runs in, and they're trying to get the seats next to the middle seat where they know the Pharisee's going to be sitting, or the other prize seats are directly across from them. So the 3 directly across from them and the 2 right next to them, that's the prize seats. So as soon as they open the doors, these guys who have been invited are all running over to the table, tripping over each other, trying to get the best seats, okay? And so Jesus sees this happening, which is this human nature, and he goes, you know what? I need to give you guys some advice. And so he's going to give them this advice, which is, as he sees them doing this, he's going to tell them kind of think about how you're doing it, think differently about what you're doing, because their intent is, I want to kiss up to this guy, because if I can get close to power, maybe his influence will rub off on me, and I can shortcut kind of my advancement in society by being close to them. So we see this all the time in modern society with our rich or our famous people. Like, how many of you run into someone famous? Okay? You can tell that story for a while, right? Like, you can say, like, I ran into that guy. So my childhood idol, Isaiah Thomas. I've seen him in an airport before, and, like, not within, like, speaking distance of him. I didn't speak to him, but I got within speaking distance of him. And it's one of those things you remember, and you're like, hey, I got close to Isaiah Thomas. That's what these guys are doing, which is I want to get close to that guy because he's famous, he's got influence, he's prestigious in society. I want that seat. So they do that. So then Jesus says this in verse 8. He says, when you're invited to the wedding feast, don't sit at the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you also has been invited? So he's telling the guys, hey guys, you might want to rethink what you're doing here because you don't control all the variables. You don't know the situation. You don't know all the different people who have been invited. And so you might want to rethink what it is that you're actually up to here and just trying to get that best seat. And then he says this, I'll suggest a better way in verse 9. He says, the host will come and say, give this person your seat. So we're going to use Valerie today. So Val, you're my example, okay? So we're going to say Valerie runs in and gets the prime seat right next to the Pharisee, okay? Now Valerie isn't really known by the Pharisee, but she got invited. So Valerie wants, I want to rub shoulders with this guy. This could pay off well for me. I want to be close to that guy. So she sits there and he's going, but what if he comes in? So now he comes in after everyone has their seats, sees Valerie and goes, Valerie's here, but I have, let's say Ashley. So Ashley, you're my other one. I have Ashley, and Ashley, I wanted Ashley sit next to me. So he's saying, he comes in and he goes, Val, or he might not even know your name. Lady, would you just move out of that seat? Ashley, come over here and come sit at the seat. I want to talk to you. Okay? And he's going, If that happens, that is going to be horribly embarrassing to you. That's going to be humiliating to you. It's going to be one of those things you can't live down. Now, usually what happens in that situation, you've seen this before in life, the people who refuse to move then. Have you ever seen that where they're like, no, I'm going to stay here. And then someone has to be like, no, you need to leave. Like, you need to move. No, you need to go, all right? And so he's warning them, that's not what you want to have happen. You get the best seat, and then someone else more influential shows up, and the host says, give them your seat. And the other thing that happens is this. Instead of getting the best seat, what seat are you going to get? The one nobody wanted. So now you're totally out of the realm of influence. You go to the worst spot at the table. So Jesus says this in verse 10. He says, instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you will be honored in front of all the other guests. All right? So now he's given a scenario. He's going, this is the best result you could get. And he's saying, when you show up, instead of just trying to rub noses and kiss up to the guy who's in power, you go, you sit down at the other end of the table, and you just sit down there. And then when he comes in, now we have Val sitting over there. And he comes in and sees Ashley, so we're going to reverse you two so one of you doesn't feel depressed when we get out of here today and the other one feels good. So this time we're going to say Val's the one that's desirable and Ashley is the undesirable, okay? Ashley's now sitting in the prime seat and Val's down at the end of the table because Val decided, I'm not going to assume anything, I'm just going to sit there. Then the guest comes in and goes, Valerie, good to see you. Hey, come on up here. And then she's now being highlighted because she took a seat of humbleness and he's highlighting her. Even if she's not at the prime seat of influence at that table, she now probably is known by more people than that person sitting in that prime seat. Why? Because she was pointed out for her humbleness because she sat somewhere down there and he was like, hey, come on up here. And everybody now knows who Val is. Does that make sense? So he's giving some practical advice here. So let me translate that into your work life and just situational life things that we run into on a daily basis. Here's what he's saying. Don't spend your effort trying to kiss up to those with seats of influence and power, but rather spend all of your effort trying to develop a reputation as a hard worker and someone of integrity. Okay? So he's telling you, hey, don't go around trying to shortcut everything. Don't go around just trying to manipulate people and kiss up to people, and that's how you're going to get your step up the corporate ladder or wherever you are at work. How are you going to work on being a hard worker and someone of integrity, okay? And with that, be humble, be patient, trusting that eventually doors will open to you based on your work ethic and based on your integrity, okay? And just have trust that that will happen. That type of an advancement, when you advance because of what you do, not because you're kissing up or because you're manipulating people, that type of an advancement is a much more stable and long-lasting type of advancement than it is if you're trying to attain those positions through kissing up to someone or manipulating them. Those people sometimes advance faster than you, but you will often see those people also descend faster than you because usually it catches up to them. So he's saying, hey, work on just being someone that has a work ethic, someone that has integrity. Be humble about who you are and don't just assume you deserve things. Just be humble. And most of the time, people in power, people in influence are going to notice that, and eventually they're going to raise you up, okay? And you just have to have the patience to trust the process Jesus is giving you. So real quick, Jesus here is just giving practical advice to people at a dinner party and going, hey, I'm just trying to give you guys practical life advice, okay? So you don't embarrass yourself and you can actually get honored easier. Does that make sense? Now he's going to shift to spiritual points. So that's practical advice for your work, whatever. Verse 11, he now transitions over to the spiritual realm, and he talks about a topic he hits on many times in the four Gospels, and he says this in verse 11. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So here's what he's saying. Those who exalt themselves, what he means is this. Those who use their spiritual lives to impress others and gain influence. So you use your spiritual gifts, your spiritual life, what you do in your spiritual private time. You use all those things in order to gain influence with others and impress others. That's the reason you do those things. He says people who do that will be humbled, And what he means by humbled is this: even if people don't catch it, someday you will stand before the Lord. He knows your heart. He knows what your intentions were. He knows what you were up to, and you will be humbled. So whether it's here or it's before his judgment throne, someday it's going to catch up to you. Okay? Then he says this: those who humble themselves. What he means by that is this: those who use their spiritual life to honor God. The reason you do the things you do is because you want to honor him. You want to bring praise to him. You desire to please him. Okay? So those who humble themselves, he says, will be exalted, meaning God will give you honor you might not have received when you were here. So some of us as Christians, living the way God tells us to live, maybe sometimes you won't get honored here. Maybe sometimes other people will advance and it never equals out and you never feel like you got justice. And what he's saying here is, hey, hold on. Don't worry about it. Trust me, because someday I do see it and someday you will be rewarded. Someday you will be exalted. Someday I will lift you up and people will notice what you did. Okay? So his first spiritual truth of this parable is this: Jesus considers service as more important to his kingdom than status. Jesus desires service and values service much more than status. We try to live this out as a church. Our leaders at this church, they serve selflessly. That's what we do at this church, is what we try to do. We do not do things trying to receive honor from you and prestige from you and for you to clap for us. If you know our elders and our deacons and their wives and stuff at this church, we are people who serve. That's what we do first. Is you have a lot of them that are here on Wednesday nights, cooking food and stuff like that for the kids. You have them after church doing different things. You have them meeting during the week. You have them with food bank. You have them in the background all over the place serving this body and serving this community. And the reason you don't know who all their faces are necessarily, like, well, who are all the leaders and stuff, is because it's really not that important to us. Okay? If you need one of the leaders for spiritual direction, we'll point you to them and you'll have that time with them and stuff like that too. But our first heartbeat is serve. So we teach, we lead, we serve. We do those things in this church not for prestige, not to have status, but for the Lord, because we know that's what we're called to do, is we are to be the leaders of servanthood in this church. So I've often been criticized in my years of ministry because I don't sit around just talk to people all the time. So when things are going on, the first thing I don't do is go talk to people. What do I always do at this church? If you see me long enough, what do? I'm always doing stuff. I always serve. So I'll go get the work done first. After the work's done, then I'll go visit with people. So I always tell people, if you want to spend time with me and get some answers, come serve next to me and walk with me or do whatever I'm doing, and we'll have a conversation while we're working. But we're going to serve first, then we will go talk. Okay? In a lot of places, this is different. In a lot of churches, what do the leaders do? They go talk, and then they've got a bunch of other people going and serving. Right? That's how a lot of places work. Jesus is telling us that's not how it's supposed to work in the church. That's not how it should be. I've served 7 weeks in a nursery during Sunday school while Jeff Clark's been teaching. Why? We don't have anyone for that right now. We're building that rotation. So now, like I was saying in Sunday school class, me and Chloe are like this. We're inseparable. So because Chloe's been with me for 7 straight weeks, so me and Chloe, the girl had never said a word to me before 7 weeks ago. Now me and her, we know intimate details about each other's lives, and we are besties, okay? Besties. Why? Because we serve, okay? Now, next thing he says is this in verse 12. He says, then he turned to the host. So here's what's interesting. First he talks to all the people showing up to the table, and he's like, I need to give you guys some advice. The host shows up, the house, and Jesus, and this is where you see the guy has boldness. Now he turns to the host and says, hey, let me talk to you a little bit, okay? And so he shows up and he says this. He says, when you put on a luncheon or a banquet like you're doing right now for us, he said, don't invite your friends, which are there right now. Don't invite your relatives, who are there right now. Don't invite rich neighbors, who are there right now at his table. So he's saying, don't invite all the people you just invited. He says, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Okay? So he points out human nature. Human nature is we don't mind helping out people or doing things for people that we think can pay us back. And so people have this natural feeling, if you do something nice for me and I can repay you back, I do it back. I'm going to give you a little minor way you see this in practical ways. Our Christmas card thing we do every year at the church here, be honest, how many of you have done Christmas cards, then got a card from someone that you didn't do a card for because you missed them or something, and then you went home and went, oh, I got to get them a card, and you wrote them out a card and you stuck it in the slot the next week because you wanted to make sure they got a card from you because you got a card from them? Raise your hand, be honest if you've done it. There's several of you in here. Okay, see, we do that. Yeah, okay, some didn't want to raise their hand, but then it came in late because God convicted them right there. We do this because we feel like if someone does something nice for us, you scratch my back, I will scratch your back. And Jesus is saying to this Pharisee who's supposed to be a leader of the religious community, hey, buddy, all the people you're inviting to your banquets and meals here aren't the people you should be inviting as a leader of God's kingdom. Those are not the people you should be inviting to your dinners. Spiritual truth number 2 is this. The most desired service in God's kingdom is service done without any hope or desire for a returned reward. That's the most valuable service. When you do service knowing or with no expectation of getting anything back, God says that's the best form of service. Okay? Here's the thing. This is hard. It is very hard because we have a desire to at least get a little reward back for the times that we serve. Have you ever gotten upset because you did something for someone, you served them, and they didn't even at least say thank you? You know you have. We all say this at times. You did something for someone, you might not want them to scratch your back and do it back, but you expected at least a thank you, and they didn't give you a thank you, and it bugged you for the next 2 weeks because you're like, I can't believe they didn't even tell me thank you. I did all that for them. I spent 3 hours doing that stuff for them, and I didn't even get a thank you. We all been there? We know how it feels. That's our internal side of us going, I was serving. Yes, I was serving, but I was serving and hoping for a little something back. Okay? It's easy to help people who you feel are above you. People that you feel like can elevate you or benefit you down the road. Those people are easy to serve. People that you go, you know what? I'm going to go help Steve Gardner. Because if I help Steve Gardner, man, someday down the road, he could probably elevate me or he could benefit me back somehow. So I'll at least run the risk. Even if I don't get anything, at least I'm gambling on the right person and I might get something. And Steve at the end of it will at least tell me, like, thank you. So that's a good service. It's harder to go serve someone who you feel that's below you, who you know has zero ability to elevate you or benefit you in the future in any way. So it's harder to go out there on a street corner with someone that's homeless and do something for them when you know there is zero reward you're ever going to get back. Zero. And Jesus is highlighting that, going, hey guys, but those are the people you need to be serving, not these people. Those are the people you need to be inviting to your dinner. These are the people you need to be doing something special for, is those people. And this is a hard teaching because we don't like that. That's uncomfortable. Why? I don't want to give my time, my effort, and my energies to things and not get something back. And Jesus is going, no. That's the truest form of service, is serving people who can't give you anything back. Verse 13, he says this, instead what you ought to do, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Now understand, Jesus is talking to a Pharisee. These guys lived in immaculate wealth, okay? They had nice homes. Everywhere they walked in society, everyone praised them. They were Joel Osteen, okay? Living it well. And he says here, you shouldn't be inviting all the rich people from your church over. Go get the people out the streets. The people who've never experienced anything like this before. Go get them. Bring them to your dinner. Go spend time with them. That's who I want you to spend time with. This leads to spiritual truth number 3, which is this. God opens his kingdom to everyone, no matter what value society places on them. Okay? God's kingdom is open to everybody, not just the elites, not just the specials. And that's how the religious leaders of Jesus' time saw it, was they had the keys, or in their view, they had the keys to the kingdom of God, which is you kind of have to go through us to connect to God. And therefore, they closed off the kingdom of God to anybody they felt had no value to them. So if you were down and out, if you were crippled, if you were sick, whatever it was, you didn't have access to the kingdom. But if you were wealthy, if you had fame, if you had prestige, hey, we like you. You look the right way, you have the right stuff, we'll open the kingdom to you. And Jesus is making it clear here, no. My kingdom's open to everybody. My kingdom is for every single person. Now, here's the thing. The sad truth about the American church and the American Christian today is we don't do this one well. Okay? I know this from my previous experience at a previous church, being in an organization that planted churches and going to meetings where they plant churches. And I can tell you what the number one factor was of them determining where they were going to plant churches. Anyone want to take a guess at what the number one factor was? Meaning what? Medium income. First thing, okay? Wasn't a discussion of lost people. Wasn't a discussion of souls. It was a discussion of here's per capita income, and these are the places we can target, and there's not too many churches around there, so we think we can get our piece of the pie, and we can go in there, okay? That was one of my things, stepping into that light and being in that realm where I was like kind of taken back at times, kind of going, this doesn't make sense to me, okay? But this happens in the American church, and it happens in our spiritual lives more than we want to admit, which is it's so much easier for me to go serve Teresa, for me to go serve Becky, for me to go serve Mark. It's so much easier for me to go serve them than it is the person out there that's crippled, dirty, smelly, whatever it is, and going and spend time with them. Okay? And Jesus is highlighting that, going, hey, guys, my kingdom's for those people too. As much time as you're spending with the comfortable people, you better be spending with the uncomfortable people. Okay? That's the third spiritual truth. The last thing he says is this in verse 14. He says, then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. So then at the end, he says, hey, at the resurrection, even if you get no benefit here, even if you sacrifice and you get taken advantage of here, know at the resurrection, you'll be rewarded. When you stand before me, I know it all, I will reward you. That gets to spiritual truth number 4, which kind of summarizes all this together. And here's this truth. It is this. Our faith is revealed in who we serve, how we serve, and what we expect when we serve. Okay? Our true faith, how much we trust God, we see it in our who we serve. So who is it we're serving most of our time? Okay? The good thing I can say about this church as an organization, we spend a lot of time serving our community and helping the down and out. So when I read this one and when I'm studying this, I'm like, okay, I think as a church we're on the right page here. We're doing the right things. Our Wednesday ministry, our food bank ministry, we spend a lot of time working with people who have no ability to benefit us in any way, shape, or form. Okay, that's a good thing. So our faith is seen in who we serve, how we serve. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it to praise for ourselves? Are we doing it to pump ourselves up? Are we doing it to impress other people so other people are like, yeah, look at them, look at what they're doing, or what? How you serve is another thing that shows your faith, that reveals your faith. And the last thing is what we expect when we serve. What's your expectation? Do you get defeated when you don't get the reward that you thought you would? Do you stop serving people who don't tell you thank you because you're like, yeah, I've served someone like that before and they didn't tell me thank you, I'm not going to serve them because the last one didn't? Because I have expectations of what I want. How we serve, what we expect, those things reveal our faith. Where our faith needs to be placed in then is this, that we trust that God sees everything we do with the heart in which we do it, and he will reward what the world takes advantage of in us, which is our humility and our selfless service. I'm not up here to tell you the world's going to treat you right, okay? In fact, Jesus tells us multiple times the world will not treat you right because they're going to treat you the same way they treated him, which is this. When you selflessly serve other people, when you show humility, there will be times this world takes advantage of those things and gets in front of you. And your faith is shown by going, but I will continue being who God called me to be, and I will not play their games. I will not play the way they play, I will continue to play the game the way God told me to play the game. And what I mean by game is the game of life. I will continue to act. I will continue to serve with humility the way God has told me to serve, whether I get ahead or whether people take advantage of me. Not worried about it. Why? Because I know someday I will stand before his judgment throne. And if I got taken advantage of here, he will bring justice and he will make it all right someday when I stand before him. And if you understand that and you live that out, it shows how deep your faith is and how much you truly trust the promises of God. Because his promise is this: serve the way I tell you to serve, and whether you get good results here or not, someday the Eternal One will reward you, because I see everything. Make sure that's your mindset that allows you to serve and be the type of servant that Christ wants you to be in this world. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,